Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Staggering Giant. Leave your god, your king, and your sword at the door. Sorry about the headphones, I just needed to test my audio. So, this evening I'm doing something a little bit different for anybody who was here the previous couple of weeks. I was working on some subclasses that would be useful in different scenarios. My main focus was on the world of Dark Sun. And in the interim, I believe I mentioned in one of the previous shows that there were some old modules that I was looking at that I might be able to take advantage of to run as full modules for players if they're interested, and that these would be run in my own kind of world. But in the meantime, I got my hands on a bit of an old classic. I have all three of the Desert of Desolation series, and I've thought that perhaps these could be useful as modules that I could play. And what better place to play those than in the Dark Sun world? Dark Sun, for those who aren't aware, is a non-standard Dungeons & Dragons world that has similar content to other D&D worlds, but is also famously different. It's a world where elves, dwarves and halflings do exist, but they're not like the elves, dwarves and halflings that you're used to. Elves are bandits that run through the desert, attacking caravans that go between the few city-states that still exist in the world. The dwarves are highly focused individuals who need to complete a vision quest before their death, or they become desert wraiths. And halflings are savages that live on the outside of the ringing mountains in the jungles. They are known or suspected to be cannibals, and effectively guardians of the scant forest that is on the outside of the Tablelands, where most of the action in the Dark Sun world takes place. The city-states themselves are the few points of civilization, in some ways similar to a Point of Light campaign, that the city-states are I suppose the domains of the main rulers of the land. Dark Sun was a world that was described as having a meta plot, which was an overall plot that drove all of the action. And in this meta plot, the Sorcerer Kings were the grand controllers of the vast majority of the city-states, and they ruled with an iron fist, using incredible magical power and their psionic abilities to provide power to their secret police, the Templars, and to control the lands around, ensuring that magic wasn't damaging or harmful to the land. Another twist in the Athos world was that magic did exactly that. In order to use magic, you had to take power out of the land, and magicians broke up into two bands of users. One was the Defilers, who, with indiscriminate, self-serving purpose, took their magical power out of the land. The other were the Preservers, who attempted to return power to the land once they had finished making use of it. Either way, all arcane magic was banned. Ironic in a world that is controlled by Sorcerer Kings, but there you go. It was illegal to be a magician, and the Sorcerer Kings guarded their power quite jealously. Magicians formed a society themselves, the Preservers did, called the Veiled Society, where they could hide their magic and learn tricks for being able to cast spells publicly without being caught. As a result of the abuse of magic over many, many years, the world of Dark Sun, Athos, has been destroyed. So, apart from small patches of oasis or the scrublands or the jungle outside the Ringing Mountains itself, there is sand and silt and ash and not much else. You would think that somewhere along the line gods would have gotten involved, but the heavens are empty and silent in Athos, and clerics in the world in the second edition rules worshipped a elemental forces instead. And these elemental forces would have been the driving powers. Contact directly to the elemental planes. So in terms of the Sorcerer Kings, one of the books described a particular Sorcerer King called Calic, who tried to use a trick to become a dragon. As it stands, there's only one known dragon in the world of Athos, and Calic wanted to become another dragon because this was a higher form that the Sorcerer Kings could take. This would give him more power and allow him to consolidate his position, and maybe even challenge the lands of the other dragon. It didn't work out for him, and that gives us the clue that there may be other failed rulers, other failed Sorcerer Kings in the world. And that's where I'm coming in today. The Desert of Desolation series and the amalgamated version of it that was published by TSR under the second edition rules and the first edition rules was ostensibly a sort of sandbox. When the first module, Pharaoh, was originally published, it was a site-based adventure. It was based around the idea that a pharaoh whose land had been cursed was wandering as a ghost in those lands, attempting to redeem himself and thus bring life and prosperity back to his lands. The pharaoh was known as Amun-Re in the module, and by going to his tomb, the players were expected to somehow solve his problems. Of course, the twist of it being that his tomb was supposed to be impenetrable. So how are the players meant to find anything that would be useful to solve his issues? From this, as Tracy Hickman got a job with TSR and his wife Laura, as they got work with TSR, the module was rewritten. And while they were rewriting it as part of a series, they added in another element, the sunken city of Pazar. The sunken city was a place that had an unusual artifact lying in it. I don't want to go into too much detail in case any of my potential players decide to watch this video, but the sunken city was a place where there was a powerful artifact that if the players used it, it would release something into the world that would cause havoc. Now, anybody who's played the module in the past, anybody who's read it or even just heard stories about it probably knows what that is. But once that power is released into the world, that brings you into the action of the second module. There's a bit of a delay because there's still the site of the Pharaoh's pyramid to take. Once you get, excuse me, once you get to the Pharaoh's pyramid, you find 3 artifacts, some of which are incredibly powerful. But these artifacts are part of a series, and that's where the story comes in for the rest of the modules. Now, when Pharaoh was originally published, it was a single module. It wasn't even under TSR's banner, and it was only after Tracy and Laura Hickman, you may recognise those names, got the job with TSR that it was republished as part of the series. TSR, in typical fashion, and I'll go back to the main window to present this one, in typical fashion, released the module in a standard format. This was pretty much how all modules were dealt with. And in this format, you had 2 covers, 2 wraparound covers that would have maps on the inside with the details. These are them slightly backwards for some of you, and like I said, I don't want to give too much away for my players, but you would have sets of maps on the inside of the covers, and then inside you would have the module text. And the module text, in this case, again, pardon me, was a 32-page booklet, which was one of the standard sizes, that detailed the sunken city, several desert encounters that you'll come across, and the pyramid, the Pharaoh's pyramid. The Pharaoh's world of Dark Sun is set in the Tablelands, and as you can see, there's no edge on the map. There is a suggestion of a sea in the Sea of Silt, but that is a basin full of fine silt sand. There's a few islands in there, and in one of the expansion modules, you find that there is a large island somewhere in the centre of it. But that wouldn't be of interest to us. One of the key features of one of the modules is a geographical feature, and it's not, to my mind, particularly well used in the third module, the Tomb of Martek. But it's very evocative, and it is something that I would like to make use of if I did want to run this module. So I think that as there's so many edges on the map, this would be something that you could put somewhere off the edge of the map. We can go south and discover that the deserts of the Pharaoh, the Oasis and the Tomb, those desert regions are somewhere south of the map, somewhere off the beaten track. Perhaps these regions have been largely abandoned because the Sorcerer King isn't there. Because despite their power and despite their despotic nature, they do actually control the land. They do actually maintain some sort of order. And in a world where life and death is an everyday thing, having somebody who can maintain order is always a benefit. So, outside of the pyramid, you get to the Oasis of the White Palm. This was the second module. And here you get even more politics. The Thun have a natural enemy called the Symbians. And the Symbians are a more open trading society than the Thun were. These are people who used to be one nation, and they are no longer. They're now enemies. The Symbians don't value religion the way the Thun do, and would be quite happy to hire a party of adventurers to go in and steal artifacts out of a pyramid or a sunken city. They will be happy to raid a tomb or an old temple to one of the now dead gods, they would be happy to buy and sell whatever they can get their hands on. Not quite a society of murder hobos, but not far off it. The advantage for the Symbians over the Thun is that the Symbians are the society based around some of the power in this region, our new region of the map. And the Symbians are loyal to their sheikh or their sorcerer king or their, I haven't quite decided how this is going to go yet, and effectively make up the army. The Thun have a kind of a sect that exists even within Symbian society, which is a more extreme version of the Thun society. It's not just about preservation of religion, it's about re-establishing the old religions, which would involve overthrowing the current rulers. This creates a nice little political scenario, but it's on a very small scale in the module. So once you understand what's going on, once you understand who's who and who's part of which organization, then you start getting into the meat of the adventure. There's a rescue that needs to be done. There's protection of the rulers, and there is the power that maybe was released in the first module that has to be dealt with, and that power is growing. As that power becomes more and more entrenched in the world, they start to build their own army. Once they start that, then the players are kind of on a time limit. There are, in the tableland, city-states. South of here, there could be smaller cities, perhaps even a few city-states that are trying to get re-established. They would be under threat, and it's up to the players to find the necessary artifacts, to gain the knowledge or the power to deal with this new threat. Now, there's a certain amount of railroading involved in all of this. Module 2 and Module 3 don't really happen unless you have been to the Sunken City. I'm not a fan of railroading. I don't know about you guys, but I'm definitely not a fan of railroading. I want my players to be in control. I want my players to be the ones making the decisions. I also want them to be the people who are finding the artifacts or finding the knowledge and using it for themselves. It's kind of ironic that in a module that's based in a desert, it's not very sandboxing. It's supposed to cover a large region, there's supposed to be a lot going on, but there's not a lot of sandboxing that you can do. The second module on its own has a certain amount of sandboxing. You can come across the different parts of it at different times. There's no guaranteed set way that the players will come across the individual parts. By putting the three modules together and treating them as a single module, as TSR tried to do, you can get that feeling. You can get that sandbox element back into it. What if the players discover the oasis before they find the Sunken City? What if they come across the ruins of one of the old cities before they come across the armies of the main bad guy? What if they never release the main power? Is there anything else going on? The politics introduced in the second module definitely give you something to work with there. You could still have an entire sandbox area based on the rival armies of the Thun sect and the Symbians. You could have it as open warfare. You could run it as political intrigue, spies inside the courts of the sheikhs or the sorcerer kings or whoever is trying to become established. You could twist the module around. Maybe whoever is currently in control in the south could become a major threat, because they themselves are becoming a sorcerer king and maybe have found a way that they can get on the path to the Dragonhood, Calyx Gamble, that they are themselves trying to become a new power in the region. That could make them a threat to a lot of the existing cities. If that was to happen, would those existing cities sit back and hope that the desert is broad enough to protect them, or would they be likely to take action to stop this upstart from trying to take over the throne? The second module does give you a lot to work with there, and that's probably where the main focus of the politics and the forward-moving action would come from. So how do we tie the players into it? There's a surprisingly large number of ways. One of the options that I thought of was the quite simple, our players are going to be working for somebody who wishes a great artifact in a lost city that they have heard of that the players have to go out and find. They'll get paid for this. This is the murder hobo scenario. It could be very beneficially used. It's a great way for beginning players in particular to get involved in a large module. They could have a warlock whose patron is maybe allied with the big bad guy. So this warlock is being directed, hinted at. I need you to go somewhere. I need you to do something for me. And that warlock could accidentally end up releasing something terrible into the world. And then the players have to deal with the consequences of that. It could also be that the political intrigue that's already been introduced in the second module creates a scenario where the players are hired if they've already established their name, or even if they're unknowns. Sometimes an unknown is what you need to deal with a scenario, to deal with a situation of subterfuge. All of these options are available to get the players involved in the action. I imagine, depending on who my players end up being, that the scenario is going to run a few weeks, possibly a few months. The political intrigue itself could keep the players going for several weeks as they try to discover who's part of what group, who is attempting to achieve what plot, whose scenario is the greatest threat to the region. The release of the big bad guy, as I've been calling him, is another option that, if it does come to pass, could result in great instability. At that point, it could be the player's job to actually get all of these rival factions working together, if that's at all possible, as a way to stand up to this one mighty force, potentially overpowering force that is now within the region. That's the most unstable option, and it's probably the option that's most likely to lead to kind of a personal involvement for the players, because if that option starts late in the game, then the players could find themselves already having established links and friendships in the region. If some of these links are threatened, that definitely gives the players an investment in making sure that they deal with this, that this threat is neutralized. Either way, whichever option ends up happening, these players are going to be drawn in, hopefully motivated, and hopefully, given the opportunity, well rewarded for what they do. Remember that the world itself is not large. It's a small space with very little civilization in it. Any threat to that space is a threat to the lives and livelihood of the players. Any threat to that space is a threat to the small remaining life in the region that's barely holding on. That could be a noble quest enough for the players to get involved in. And any great instability is likely to lead to war. In the history of Dark Sun, as a world, there was a focus on champions, challengers, and armies that would come forward and stand up for their city-states. They would stand up for their beliefs. These were difficult times, but they were rare because the cost to life was very high, because it was very difficult to recover from a war, particularly if a lot of your population has been destroyed. It's important in running this module and in redesigning this module that I look at it from the point of view that this is not the standard world. There are big issues that would have to be dealt with. Obviously, water is going to be an issue. Transport is an issue. Getting from place to place is a life-threatening activity. Who you ally with could be a problem, because if you end up accidentally allying with somebody who is a wizard, a sorcerer, then you are allying with criminals. While a sorcerer king may be willing to overlook that in the short term, they're not going to continue overlooking it for long. So, a lot of intrigue to be had, a lot of adventure to be had, a lot of danger to be faced with. On top of that, this is definitely a world where the Mystic class comes into play. As it stands, I've only got the Unearthed Arcana to work with, so that will be the version of the Mystic that I'll be using. And for anybody who's been following, I've developed some subclasses of my own, some of which are based around the Mystic idea. I have posted some of those on Twitter at Staggering Giant, if you want to have a look at those. I will repost those links on a semi-regular basis. But from next week, I'm going to take this module and I'm going to start rebuilding it for 5th edition. I'm going to start making it, as I said, ironically more sandboxy than it currently is. And I'm going to start trying to build it in such a way that it establishes a real political structure and places for the players to feel at home. Places for the players to feel like that they can set down roots and that things will matter to them. What do we think, guys? Is this a module that people think might be interesting, expanded and built on? Is it a module that maybe is a little bit too well known to be able to get away with? Would it involve a lot of work to redesign it? Either way, I'm going to run with it. I know myself from my past Dungeons & Dragons experience that replaying a module doesn't necessarily mean going through the motions. Different dungeon masters and different players can make a module entirely different the second time through. If you're interested in keeping up to date and in finding updates, then you can follow me at Staggering Giant on Twitter. You can follow the channel here, which will be very much appreciated, and I'll be posting updates. The module will hopefully start on New Year's Day with a session 0 to get characters established. And once we've done that, we'll go ahead with the first steps, a lot of which will be building the world, putting the players into the world, and getting the forward motion from there. I hope you'll join me. The actual playing of the campaign will go out on the Thread Raiders channel, if you want to have a look at those guys. They're establishing their work now, and they've got quite a few threads coming up, and some already started. There is a new Thread Raider channel starting at midnight. I should say midnight GMT. That will be over on the Thread Raiders channel in about 20 minutes. If you'd like to go and join them, you can see what those guys are all about, and that's where we'll be building the module itself. If you want to see the module coming together, how I react to the players and how I make changes to the modules as play goes on, then I'll do that on here. As I think my players may well be Thread Raiders already. Thank you for joining me this evening. Thank you for listening. Come join me at Staggering Giant on Twitter, and I hope you'll join me on this adventure as well. There's still room for players if you're interested in coming and joining. Thank you very much. Welcome to the Staggering Giant. I hope to see you again.